let's jump in. I'm going to share my screen right away as we continue to look toward Shavuot. And today, as opposed to last week where we concentrated on how Shavuot has evolved from the agricultural to the study of Torah and then back again to the agriculture. And interestingly, we were talking about Gail and Zipporah gardening and Shemitah. Today, we're going to focus on Zman Matan Toratenu, the giving of the law. And I'd like you to help me complete this sentence. Remember, there are no right or wrongs here. With the giving of the Torah, God gave us whatever comes to mind first.
Life, a framework.
A framework. What was the first thing? Life?
I said life.
Good. Nachama, Bev. Anybody else? Framework, life?
What about the foundation of Christianity? Of course, they add an extra layer, but it's they accept our 5 books.
Okay. Is that Elliot?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Elliot.
Hey,
Yes.
I remember, and I'm not even seeing you, but I remember your voice.
Cleveland, Ohio.
Yes.
Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a friend of Stephen Creed and Richard Pass. My wife, who I lost 8 years ago, was from Toronto. So that's my second city.
Okay, welcome. Welcome.
Ethics?
Ethics. Anybody else?
I was going to say a framework for morality.
Okay, you're making the framework more specific. Somebody else said something?
Responsibilities.
Promise for Eretz Yisrael.
Promise of Eretz Yisrael,
Part of the covenant.
the covenant. Brenda, what did you say?
Responsibilities.
Responsibility.
His
Okay.
greatest gift.
Michael?
His greatest gift.
His greatest gift. Beautiful answers. I'm going to tell you, which does not at all contradict, but what came to my mind, and of course, I have an advantage over you, I've had much more time to think about it, was an invitation to a project. With the giving of the Torah, God gave us an invitation to a project. And let's see what this project is, even though I'm sure I could ask again and we'd hear varied answers, but let's begin to look at Ma'amad Har Sinai, the giving of the Torah, and try to envision the atmosphere that you think was there, besides the thunder, etc. You are all standing this day before the Lord your God, the leaders of your tribes, your elders and your officers, every man of Israel. Your young children, your women, and your convert who is within your camp, both your woodcutters and your water drawers, that you may enter the covenant of the Lord your God and his oath, which the Lord your God is making with you this day, Hayom, in order to establish you this day as his people, and that he will be your God as he spoke to you, and as he swore to your forefathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. But not only with you am I making this covenant and this oath, but with those standing here with us today before the Lord our God, and also with those who are not here with us this day. And this is taken from Devarim, Deuteronomy, which you know repeats much of what has come before, as Moshe reviews the Israelites' history before he says goodbye. So tell me a few things, tell us a few things we uncover about God's expectations of us from this text.
You're supposed to take some of the challenges that we're facing as humanity and in a sense be partners with God based on this law, based on the ethical principles, etc. So it's a homework assignment, it would seem like.
Okay, very good. Yes, we are to be partners with God. Somebody else.
The covenant.
The covenant, which includes this partnership. We're not just doing it under God, together with God. Thank you, Bev.
I think it's more than that. It's that everything we have actually belongs to God. Like I give you the land, like
Okay. There is an expectation, even if it's not explicitly understood here, that there's a partnership to a certain point, but we have to realize, and we mentioned this last week with the agriculture, that we are not the key owner. And there's something very significant about us realizing that. Thank you, Esther. Anything else?
This covenant is made with every single man, woman, and child. No one is excluded, and not just the people standing there, but all future generations.
Exactly. All of us.
You
All of
know,
us.
Bracha, I'm taken with that last phrase as a follow-up to what this gentleman was just saying. With those who are not here with us this day, is not, to my mind, isn't just those that will come in the future, us, but those that came before, the slaves in Egypt. It encompasses the whole of the people. To my mind, I was quite taken with that phrase anyway.
Okay, well, all of this is meant to remind us exactly, Tzipora, that we are caught up, we are part of a chain, and all of us are reminded that this covenant was made with Avotenu v'Imotenu before us and will continue. We are part exactly of God's promise. Anything else?
Yes,
Go ahead.
we are mentors to the rest of humanity.
Okay.
It's our responsibility to teach others God's way.
Beautiful. In fact, as long as you're saying that, you know that this could have been a message to everybody. God started off, you'll remember months ago, we discussed this. He started off wanting to have this plan with everyone. Adam and Eve, Noah, who were not Jewish. But then he needed to give us, as Elliot said, that homework assignment to pass it on, as you just said, to be the Or LaGoyim to the entire world.
I was thinking of the two words, L'Shem Hashem, that even every mitzvah that we do, it's like an exercise that we do for God.
Now, that's an interesting phrase. When we say for God, I'll just give you a second. What do you mean by that? To say that we're doing something for God? Esther? Or somebody else?
If I make a mitzvah, if I make any mitzvah that I do it as an exercise to honor, to do what God wants me to do.
Okay, that's a little different. That to do what God wants me to do, and it's for him. But lately I get the feeling that some of these things that we do, including prayer, that it's really meant to be for us in a constructive way.
But
Okay.
we are part of God.
Most of the time. That was a little,
Okay.
So I translated one word that we see at least twice here. Anybody catch that? I said, Hayom, this day. And we're going to come back to that in a
That's-
moment.
It's
Now, keep that in mind though. Now, I want us to look at the next chapter, a few psukim here, and I want you to pay close attention. Does this continuation of the scene sound the same as the text we just read or different? When you obey the Lord, your God, to observe his commandments and his statutes written in this Torah scroll, and when you return to the Lord, your God, with all your heart and with all your soul, for this commandment, which I command you this day, is not concealed from you, nor is it far away. It is not in heaven, lo b'shamayim, that you should say, who will go up to heaven for us and fetch it for us, to tell it to us so that we can fulfill it. Nor is it beyond the sea, that you should say, who will cross to the other side of the sea for us and fetch it for us, to tell it to us so that we can fulfill it. Rather, this thing is very close to you. It is in your mouth and in your heart so that you can fulfill it. Behold, I have set before you today life and good and death and evil, inasmuch as I command you this day to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways and to observe his commandments, his statutes and his ordinances, so that you will live and increase. And the Lord your God will bless you in the land to which you are coming to take possession of it. But if your heart deviates and you do not listen, and you will be drawn astray, and you will prostrate yourself to others, deities, and serve them, I declare to you this day that you will surely perish, and that you will not live long days on the land to which you are crossing the Jordan to come and take possession thereof. Is this similar? Is it the same tone as the first set of psukim?
No.
Bev,
Definitely not.
explain why not.
Well, here it seems to be more commanding. There's a more commanding voice and there are consequences.
Absolutely.
It sounds like there's a reward punishment characteristic here. And the assignment that I referred to before seems to be ongoing every moment. In effect, we might be tested in our relationships with others. If it's in your mouth, it could be maybe kashereth, but apart from that, what you say to others, it could be hurtful or embarrassing. So it sounds like this assignment is ongoing and would require what the modern buzzword in psychology is mindfulness, careful attention to our behavior and perhaps to our thoughts.
To me, it brings to question the word choice, because it actually you have no choice. Because if you do something right, God will reward you. If you don't, God will punish you. So the question of choice comes into question for me here.
Okay, so we still have aspects of the covenant. We still see that it being accessible to everyone, because it talks here in a different way. It says, you can handle it. It's not up in heaven. It's not so difficult. You'll be able to get this on your own, people.
Yes,
But
right.
it certainly is different in the tone that you have a sense here that you're being commanded and there will be consequences. Now, I purposely use the word consequences as opposed to punishment, because is it that God is going to cause a punishment, or is it if we don't remain attentive to the laws that are being given us, are we responsible for negative consequences?
Of course.
That's another issue. But certainly, this isn't as romantic sounding as the first text. Now, a third final text on this from the Midrash Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. Is this more similar to the first or to the second? Moshe went out to the Israelite camp and roused them from their slumber. You know, just as an aside, we're told that the tikkun that many attend all night is based on this, that the Israelites, how could they be sleeping? They know they're about to get what Michael called God's greatest gift, and they're sleeping. So to compensate for that, we show how excited we are and we stay up all night. That's just one suggestion. He said to them, "Awake! The bridegroom has arrived and is awaiting his bride so that he can lead her into the bridal chamber. God is ready to give his people the Torah. The groomsman came and brought forth the bride, as it is written, and Moshe brought the people out of the camp to meet with God, and the bridegroom came out to greet his bride, to give them the Torah." So we have this beautiful metaphor, and I'm asking you, is this closer to one or to two?
To one.
To one. Why?
Yes, I agree.
There's no such thing as talking about consequences, about what you should do or you shouldn't do. It's beautiful. It's the bride reminds me of Shabbat.
Yeah.
And the groomsmen, I guess, are the people.
Moshe here.
Yes, Moshe, and the bride is Shabbat, is
Real.
perfection.
Interesting. Everybody agree?
Yes.
Yes?
Well, the bride is Israel.
Yeah. No, but I'm asking, is there anybody?
Because very often we talk about the relationship between us and God is like a marriage.
Okay, so is marriage just like number one? Is it ever like number two?
Yes.
Could be.
Sure.
Okay, all right.
Just like you have to work at
But
keeping a marriage thrive, so you have to keep the relationship between you and God thrive. It's up to you to make it or break it.
but the time of the marriage, the original time of the marriage to me is like when the bridegroom first looks at the bride. I mean, everything is beautiful. So it's the same as receiving the Torah. You have to accept it, that it's as beautiful and you feel as the bridegroom felt. I mean, it is the metaphor, but it's sort of going just to the first part. And everybody, we said before that everybody has that ability to accept it and to feel that way.
Very good,
Bracha, could
Frida.
it be that there's something in a sense holistic about this, i.e., that if the system operates a certain way, and if you follow the system, you will have more or less, from a holistic perspective, you will have a rich and fulfilling life. And this is how the system tends to work.
Okay, a good
Yeah,
observation.
I like the analogy to marriage because marriage is a partnership that takes work to make things to be successful. But it's also, I'm wondering in the earlier reading about the consequences, like it makes me think of the God-fearing Jews, the Orthodox Jews who they themselves say they're God-fearing Jews. And I never quite understood that. I'm wondering if it comes from this, because there's consequences if you don't do your part.
look, I'm sure some people understand Yirei Adonai as fearful, but I think we, rather than focus on it that God's going to punish us, it comes from the same root as Norah, Yamim Noraim, days of awe. And so that we have this deep reverence for God, and a God-fearing person. Sure, I am positive that there are some people who obey mitzvot because they're afraid that something bad is going to happen. But preferable is this sense of reverence that it's the right path, and that profound awe of God.
But Bracha,
Okay.
I see nothing wrong with the concept of fear. People look at fear as a negative. Fear can also be a positive. You're afraid of the fire. You're afraid of, so fear to me can be a very
Esther, you're absolutely right that you sometimes fear, if you don't have that, you might end up doing something foolish, for sure, for sure. And
Can I just say, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, it's very interesting because I think most of us, when we read this text, we saw it as something very beautiful. And someone used that word earlier to describe it. Bridegroom, the bride, it's all beautiful. And yet somebody just mentioned something about more Orthodox people where you may, you are able to think that the marriage isn't just a beautiful ceremony and a beautiful union. Sometimes they don't even know each other, and we can all think what's going through the head of the woman who's led. And so when you were trying to maybe pull us in to look at something, is it really number one? Maybe there's a bit of number two in there. Then that's just an interesting thought. Anyway.
And two sisters think alike, because that's exactly what I was doing. We have not talked about this. We have not.
We can apply the marriage concept to a very literal level. I wonder how all of these words and understanding of them and the degree to which these words are wedded to a person's heart. I wonder if a bride and a bridegroom, if there would be less divorce, if people would take these words seriously to the greatest extent in their minds, in their hearts, in their souls, if there would be less divorce.
Good question.
I think the word that comes to mind is commitment.
Absolutely, despite the trials and tribulations. Now, I want to ask the next question. I said that I see Zman Matan Toratenu as an invitation for the project that we just described. Now, and I think you'll agree, this project is far from being easy. Now, I'd like you to suggest, before I suggest, through the thoughts of a couple of thinkers other than you, why is this project of relating to the Torah and making it central to our lives? To some, they do see it as easy. Why, perhaps in the communities that we come from, why is it not an easy project to make Torah what it could, and I suggest should be? Why is it not so easy relating
Bracha,
to
I
it?
think you're asking one of the most fundamental and most important questions that could be asked. Different human beings have different brains, different neurologies. They're basically, I don't want to be called mechanical, information processing systems, and their perceptions are different, and they see things different. They interpret the language very differently. So there are certain built-in inherent challenges. that come along, that go along with relationships, and the ability to follow the contract. So we have Tachanun and we have Yom Kippur, and Yom Kippur, the many al-chaitz. So I think to begin with, it's very complex and challenging. And how it can be resolved, we'll have to ask Hashem that.
Anna,
Okay, in good time. Thank you.
I can think of a personal problem that I have. Very often we don't know what the right thing to do is. I went to visit somebody at Baycrest, and then I found out that somebody else that I knew was there. So when I went to visit the second person, she said, "Oh, it's so nice that you thought of coming to visit me." Now I have a dilemma. Should I tell her the truth, that I really came to visit somebody else and found out that you are here? Or should I keep my mouth shut? So in a way, I'm not honest with her if I keep quiet and don't tell her the truth. So this is just one example of very often we really don't know what is the right thing to do.
Okay, but at least, Esther, first of all, I'd say let her feel good. And the truth is, as
Yeah.
soon as you knew that she was there, you went to visit her. But that's pointing to you looking, asking for what the right thing is. And not everybody does that, looks to the source, such as the Torah, to find an answer. Anything else that makes this project of Torah difficult these days? Somebody else. Stan.
Yes, I think we're living in diaspora as opposed to where you are. We're over the centuries, we've seen other peoples, and maybe there's envy as to how they live. And maybe we're veering off of a path. People can't accept what this paragraph says. They say, well, why can't I eat that? They're eating that. It looks good. Why can't I do something on Shabbat? I'm not going to get stoned on Shabbat like they did at one time. I can go and do whatever I want on Shabbat. It's a diasporic feeling that many people get into a routine, and some come back to it, to what it was. So I think it's because we're a dispersed people, and it's difficult.
Okay, exposure to neighbors. And by the way, some of that can happen here, but to a different extent. Absolutely. Anybody else? Okay, well, I'd like to mention a few complicating factors. So, number one, and Dennis Prager, I'm sure you've all heard of him, the broadcaster and so many podcasts and defender of Israel on university campuses. He says, we live in a feeling-based world, even regarding morality. What do you feel like doing? How do you want to do this? And he gives one example, only very briefly. You know how the rule regarding how we relate to our parents, what's the word? What does it say to do in the 10 Commandments?
Honor thy father and mother. It does not say love, and I often wonder about that.
Okay, well, I'm about to suggest to you why, according to Dennis Prager. Okay, your lucky day. It says purposely honor, because everyone is aware that perhaps more than any other relationship, the parent-child can be very, very complicated, mutually. And even if there is the bottom line, love, no matter how many disagreements, the Torah, and I'm quoting him, doesn't give a damn about feelings. but only cares about behavior.
Yeah.
Now, so first, again, because we live in such a world, not everyone looks and feels the need to open up a guidebook like the Torah. So that's the first complicating factor. I said we get back to the word today.
Oh, yes.
The second complication is people who take the easy way out in relating to the Torah. I'm going to repeat that. People who take the easy way out in relating to the Torah. Tell me, who is it that takes the easy way out? Don't think too hard.
People
Didn't
who make,
hear.
people who make their own rules.
Okay, people who ignore the Torah, don't open it up, make their own rules. You might call them, when we talked months ago about, to begin with at least, when the secular pioneers came and rejected Yiddishkeit because of their embarrassment of being so passive, et cetera, and then we said, but it's coming around now, and realize that you don't have to throw it all out. There's stuff there to maintain and cherish. Okay, so that's certainly one group.
It can be the opposite. The people who take the pshat, who just, they say it's geschrieben. That's what it says in the Torah without looking deeper into its meanings and implications.
Esther, magnificent, magnificent. Now, let me explain why. Those people who are authorized, whether it's in the diaspora that Stan just talked about, or in Israel, those authorized with imposing laws of the Torah, who don't search for their meaning in this generation, in this hour, they're taking the easy way out, says Rabbi Eliezer Berkovitz, an Orthodox rabbi philosopher, Zichrono Livracha, who was known to believe in halacha, but we're going to see how he believed in it. And he claimed any authority who just, as Esther said, says geschrieben, he's not saying throw it out. But if it's eternal, what makes it eternal is that it has something to say, something new to say and be applied to this generation and this moment. And you don't keep it in the past. Now, I want it to be very clear, though. Again, following halacha, but as the word itself says, haloch is walking. It's not static. It's moving.
It says
seriously taking life, but realizing that we live in different situations. That's exactly it. Absolutely. Now, so anyone who doesn't see the great opportunity of new situations in individual life, and certainly in the Jewish people, because we have the modern state of Israel, that we have new situations and that we have to apply the halakha accordingly, is missing out. And this is what Berkovitz says.
I
Halacha,
have a question. Can I
Yes.
ask it now or should I wait?
maybe please wait, as long as you're asking, if you can wait. Stephen, I see your hand up. Is it going to interrupt this? Because I'll tell you to wait
No,
too.
you asked the question. So people who just go with the flow of what the narrative is from those around them, without critically thinking about everything and first challenging themselves are the people I think you're talking about. Every situation and every time and every place is not the same, and we always have to think it out. And many people just don't think; they just do what they're told.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Halacha, Berkovitz says, is the bridge over which the Torah moves from the written word into the living deed. Normally, there is a confrontation between the text, which is set, and life, which is forever in motion. As the root of the word haloch, walk, go, indicates, halacha teaches the way along which the Jew is required to walk in accordance with the Torah. Halacha is the application of the Torah to life. But since there is no such thing as life in general, since it is always a certain form of life at a specific time in history, in a specific situation, Torah application means application to a specific time in a specific situation. The result of this process is what I call halachic Judaism. The Talmud expresses the idea of the integration of the human element in the Torah, and that's why it's a covenant, with the revealed word by a saying of Rabbi Yochanan. Basing himself on the literal meaning of the Hebrew, he reads a verse in Exodus in the following manner: "For in accordance with these spoken words have I consulted a covenant with you and Israel." Words of a covenant are not dictates from on high. They need to be said because we humans need it, but that's not what I wanted you to envision as we read the initial text. They are spoken in the intimacy of mutual affirmation and acceptance under the chuppah. They invite man to make his own contribution and to accept his or her share of responsibility. Halacha is the final outcome of this covenantal mutuality of recognition. The supreme principle of the law to which man is subject is theonomous. Its ultimate source of authority being will of God. Yes, the interpretation of the law and its application to innumerable and forever changing life situations are autonomous. Theonomy liberates the human will from the potentially destructive relativism of its subjectivity, the feeling that Prager talked about. Human autonomy protects the absoluteness of the law against the occasional negative consequences of its time alienated objectivity. A beautiful phrase. It wouldn't be Eitz Chaim Hi, a living Torah, if it remained totally objective. Through halacha, the word from Sinai has become the way of life of the Jewish people throughout history. And interestingly, we don't talk of him often, but the son of Rambam says something similar here. The rule in the matter is, say I, that a dayan, a judge, who in his decisions follows only what is written and clearly stated, is weak and wanting. Getting back to what Stephen said. Such an attitude invalidates what they, Chachamenu, our sages, said. A dayan, a judge, should be guided only by his own understanding after looking at everything. With him, it is not so. What is written are the roots. Every dayan and everyone who renders decisions must weigh them according to each case that comes before him. Every decision that he or she is considering, he at that time would not have said she, but we're adding it now. He or she should compare to something similar to it. They should develop branches from the roots. The numerous case histories in the Talmud, which incorporate only part of the laws, were not reported for nothing. You recall in the Talmud, unlike the concise code of Jewish law, you see the opinions of those whom we do not follow. You never know when in the future we will look and need that opinion. But neither were they recorded so that in those matters the law should always be as it is written here. They were preserved only so the wise man or woman, by hearing them often, should acquire efficiency in weighing matters rationally, as well as a good method of making decisions.
Bracha, that brings to mind that the idea that you always must question why a law is what it is. And my example is, we are not allowed to charge interest to a Jew, but you're allowed to charge to a non-Jew. And so where is the logic? To me, because a Jew is like part of my family. If he needs to borrow money and he's in need, you help him. But if it's not so a Jew, if I take my money and I put it in the bank or invest it, then I make money out of it. So it's a source of income for me. The stranger is not part of my family. I'm not obligated to help him. So therefore, it is permissible to charge repeat as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, there's actually another thought regarding that. There is a difference between dealing with a person and a person who's close to you or another individual and dealing with a bank. But part of it is because it does sound to many terrible. How do you charge interest to a non-Jew, but to a Jew you don't? It's also because the way of the world is charging interest. And if the Jewish nation wants to deal with the world, then it's got to follow those rules. Hey, perhaps for another time.
Yeah, but to me, it was just an example of understanding why the law is what it is.
Okay, all right. No, what's significant is you raising the need to not just, well, the law says this and I accept it. There is absolutely nothing wrong in trying to understand. Prager, he had given a talk at Bar Ilan University. And he says, there is no such thing as a law that we can't understand. You know, we differentiate between mishpatim and chukim, civil law, and we sometimes say those we easily understand why we do them, and a chok, a law like kashrut, and we don't understand. He says, no, every law, for it to be worth something, God wants it to be rational. And we're going to talk about that next week. Now, what Berkovitz goes on to say, and this is why I call him here Berkovitz the teacher, we have to take to heart the warning of Maimonides' son to treat the numerous codes and other halachic texts not as authority barriers, but as educational materials. Learning from them the principles and method of Torah application to real life situations. The decisions have to be made not by a text, but in full view and understanding of the situation at hand by the student of the text on his or her own responsibility. And Berkovitz brings an example here to make this point even clearer, that depending on the time, two distinguished Talmudic rabbis, Abai and Rava, discuss who is qualified to testify in a rabbinical court. Abai maintains that a person who transgresses any of what are usually called ritual commandments is not to be admitted as a witness. For instance, if out of conviction, as an act of rebellion against the divine commandment, he refuses to observe kashrut, the dietary laws, he does not qualify as a witness, according to Abai. Rava, on the other hand, asserts that only a person who deals dishonestly with his fellow men is not to be trusted as a witness. In this case, the halacha was decided according to, anybody want to take a guess?
Rava.
The second one.
Okay, Michael, I heard you say Rava. Why?
Well, to me, it's very obvious. If you're having a case in court with one person testifying on another, then what counts is not whether he keeps kosher or not, is how he deals with other people. And if a guy is dishonest with other people, then why in the world would you possibly trust him?
Okay, anybody else?
No, the same thing. In other words, like you said, judgment at all times.
Okay, well, in this case, the halacha was decided according to Abai. Now listen to this. Listen, don't give up faith. Undoubtedly, this was the correct decision in a society in which living in accordance with the commandments of the Torah was the norm of civilized behavior. Okay? One who violated that norm was indeed, in most cases, not quite trustworthy. That's how it was then. Obviously, Berkovitz says, different conditions prevail today. Can we, in all honesty, say that a Jew who does not observe the dietary laws is not to be trusted as a witness?
Well, isn't it
today to rule with Rava against Abai, very important, would not be a change of halakha. Abai never ruled in the situation that obtains today. Let us recall Rava's admonishment to his disciples not to follow his decisions after his death, should they disagree with them. What did he tell his students? After I'm gone and another case comes up, don't necessarily just carry on with my opinion if you feel differently. What he meant, the commentaries explain, was that had he lived until that day, he might have changed his own opinion. Now, I don't know about you, but as I'm reading this, there's a part of me that wants to shout, then who are these people who have not seen that this is the way it should be done? Keeping in mind that this is all to happen based on serious learning.
But isn't
it's
it
very important for me to make sure that that's very clear, that this isn't just a matter of making things easier.
I take something different out of it. The importance between law and man should take precedence over man and God. It's not kosher, that's between you and God. But the way you treat other people is between men and men. And when the question is judging people, this is the quality you're looking for.
And Berkovitz agrees with you. And he says, reducing halacha to a fixed set of rules violates its essence. Although halacha is a legal system, halacha nonetheless is a fluid system that is governed by a fixed set of moral values. I'm going to say that again. The halacha Berkovitz, this is Berkovitz. Although a legal system is nonetheless fluid, and the halacha is governed, as Esther suggests, by a fixed set of moral values. And Berkovitz goes on to say here, not only does the method of authority not work, it actually defeats the eternal validity of the Torah. The Torah is eternal because it has a word, a teaching for each generation. Every day the Torah should seem as new to you as if it had been given that day. And again, that is why we call Shavuot Zman Matan Toratenu, and not it was given and that's it. We are to open up the Torah regularly, perhaps daily, and look at it. When it uses that word hayom, you know that when you open up, whether it's a book, an article, a letter from someone, and it's new and it's not from a long time ago, that you're going to read that with a certain excitement, very different from if it was an old document. And that's the hope Berkovitz suggests that we should all feel. Our time is as important and potentially creative as was the time when the halacha was originally established. But that gives us, I think Brenda was the one who used the word responsibility. Now, similar to what I asked last week, and before that, how many of us feel this responsibility? That this project is something that we are conscious of, if not daily, on a regular basis.
You know,
I leave you
Bracha,
with that question, Stan.
I feel that halacha, unfortunately, is not fluid right now because of certain incidents that are going on an ongoing basis between our conservative and reform as opposed to the Orthodox. It's not fluid.
Wait, you have to explain what you just said.
The halacha well, I'll give you an example of what I was referring to. Some years ago, being on the Social Action Committee at Beth Tikvah, I decided it would be a nice idea for community relations to have a meeting with our local Orthodox rabbi and our rabbi at Beth Tikvah, and we can get together and have a roundtable discussion with our members and have a nice a nice thing at Beth Tikvah. And so we contacted the Orthodox rabbi who came to a kosher restaurant with us, with me and the rabbi at Beth Tikvah.
He was willing to go to a kosher restaurant?
Yeah, he went to a kosher restaurant and we discussed it, and he thought it looked very, very interesting. And he says, you know what, we should have our congregations get together. It would be an interesting evening to have a nice evening together. And we had a few meetings after that, continuing on. It came down to we were going to get an exact date. We were quite excited about it. Our neighbor came back to us, our Orthodox neighbor, said that it has been decided by our Balabatim at the synagogue that this cannot go on. End of story. The halacha at that synagogue couldn't conform to our halacha. That's what I'm saying.
By the way,
And you know what we're talking about here.
but
And this is some years ago, and this continues on. So the interpretation of the Torah is rigid in that sense.
What did you just say? Repeat exactly what you just said now. What's rigid?
The interpretation of the Torah.
Depends on who's doing the interpreting,
That's
Stan.
exactly it.
That's
Yes.
the point.
Yes.
sometimes
That's the point. These people who you're just talking about
Mhm.
and who exist here, and I'm surprised nobody has said something, which will, or maybe it will only come up next time.
a bracha,
If the point is, I'm sorry, Esther, just one sec. That it's not just a matter of here that a fellow Jew should realize he should be open to meeting with other Jews. I mean, that's got to be there and that's got to be here. But it's something even more so that if you now, it's easier to talk as this example. If you have the modern state of Israel and the laws in the Torah that are given, whether it's here 7 days and in Toronto, 8 days of Sukkot Pesach, if that was meant to happen here in Israel, and you have to have your own country, so that means you need farmers who are either going to work on Shabbat or be creative enough, as some kibbutzim did, come up with halachically Shabbat ways to milk cows. But also, you have to be open to the possibilities of what this country gives. And halacha has to recognize that. A former student of mine, I'm sorry, who made Aliyah 2 years ago, she's 35. She has a brother who lives in Tel Aviv, and he's a Tel Avivite, originally from Toronto. And she has a brother in Beitar Elite, which is a Haredi community. She loves her brother in Beitar Elite and the sister-in-law and the 2 little kids. But she was crying when? On Yom HaZikaron for soldiers, when she knew that those little kids in Beitar Elite would not be celebrating Yom HaAtzmaut. I'm sorry, I needed to just say that. Esther?
Yeah, two things I wanted to say about halacha. First of all, you can be halachically right and morally wrong.
You're going to raise that again next week with what we're going to continue discussing on this subject.
Bracha, can I ask a couple questions before we conclude?
Are you concluding us?
No. When? Just tell me when.
Okay, well, wait. If you want to be the last one, I see Shari wants to say something.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bracha, that, you know, in a secular world, you have to adapt, or, you know, people are not going to keep their Judaism. But I'm also in touch with someone who from Toronto who turned ultra Orthodox. And she was saying to me, her is only listen to rabbis who are Moshe Rabbeinu, who got literally, the law got passed down, or the Torah got passed down from Moses to the next person, and teacher to student over. So she was leading me to her rabbi, who I tried to listen to. I can't even follow him, but I agree with you, but I'm wondering if it creates a divide between the religious who tend to follow the Torah blindly and don't even consider other people, other Jews.
Just be careful with the terms you're using. There's a difference between Haredi and religious. Okay, I'm be a stickler for that. Don't want to generalize. Of course, there's room or a danger of divides, but overall, what we're talking about as we're thinking about us receiving the Torah is making sure that we take the most from it and let it live. Let it live. And that's not a matter of, again, watering it down or just adapting it to people who want it convenient. No, it's wanting to live life because of everything that happens in life, but together with halacha. Anybody else before Elliot? Now's your chance. Okay, Elliot.
Okay, thank you. Really, your classes are phenomenal. But now a couple things you referred to before. Number one, I'm understanding a little better why the Torah says honor parents rather than love them, based on the notion that you can't command emotions or somebody to feel. However, in the Shema, when it says thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and might, is there a different semantic to the word love there? That's question one. How is it used?
Okay, well, it's not just love God. There are other times that we use the phrase love also. Love your neighbor and love the stranger.
And love, but love has different meanings.
Is that feelings based, or is it solely behavior based?
It's behavior based as well, in the same way. But the question is, what is the difference? And you talked about homework assignment. I'm giving you an assignment for next week. Okay?
Okay.
Think about the difference of the relationship and why it's honor. And remember, when it talks about the mother, it's fear the mother. Right? Okay, we won't go there right now. So we have the relationship to the parent is kavod, and these three other categories of God and neighbor, or a fellow, and ger, a stranger. Why is that love?
By the way, when you say feel, it's reversed in the Ten Commandments. You love your father and your mother.
You honor your father and fear your mother, and there's a reason for that. Okay? I'll begin with that next time. Somehow I'll fit it in. You had something else?
Question two. You spoke about not charging interest to a Jew. So here's a very specific question. The banks in the US, I think, are authorized to perform legal usury with interest on credit cards being up in the upper 20s very often. So my question is, do the banks in Israel who offer credit cards, do they ask the applicant whether they're Jewish? And if they say yes, do they not charge them interest?
I'll try that out tomorrow. Absolutely not. You're living in Gan Eden if you think that happens here. It's a business. It's a business. It's a business. Should I get you my credit card printout?
When you talk about halacha, I was thinking of the Rav Kook. When it came to the etrog in Shemitah year, he says you can buy etrogs from Israel because for the economy of the country, we need it. So here was an halacha where a genius like Rav Kook changed it for the good of the country.
Well, Rav Kook was very special, very, very special, and he still speaks to us today.
Maybe
Okay,
get a U.S. credit card, Bracha, instead of Israeli. Thank you.
I'll give
Your
you my
classes
address, Elliot.
Your
Okay,
classes are phenomenal.
thank you, thank
Actually,
you. Okay, so,
Actually, the book once said to my father, Tel Aviv the Holy. So my father said to him, Tel Aviv the Holy. He says, Rabbi Wilner, there is no other city in the world like Tel Aviv that is 100% Jewish.
Tel Aviv is holy, and it's nice sometimes to leave holy Jerusalem to go to Tel Aviv.
No, but today in Tel Aviv, you do have churches, but in the 30s, you didn't. Tel Aviv was really 100% Jewish at the time.
We're all Jewish. I don't know what I meant by that. All I know is that Batu's at a campfire in Tel Aviv as we speak. Okay.
Okay.
Everybody stay well. We will continue this and talk of the relationship between halacha and morality next week. And Stan, don't give up on meeting people in restaurants, etc. Maybe that's why good Fleischach restaurants in Toronto don't last. Anyway,
That's right.
Okay. Take care. Have a good week. Happy
you.
Lag BaOmer. Shabbat Shalom.
Yasher Koach.
Shalom.
Thank you.
Toda
Baruch.
rabah.
Chag Sameach.